I'm delighted I've got Chris Thomas, Department for Infrastructure, with us. He's been doing the media rounds a bit this morning, but I've been looking for you for some time, and you promised me, you would get to us. I mean, it's never a dull moment with the department you're in, is it? I mean, let's face it.
No, that's true. That's why I wanted that ministership. I was offered at least one other one. I've mentioned in public before, and there are some huge challenges that the people of the Isle of Man face because of infrastructure issues, and I want to help the people as a representative of the people to deal with those issues. As the people's champion yourself, I'm sure we're going to go through many of those issues, and I don't mind staying as long as I want, and apologies it's taken me so long to get up here.
Well, I mean, obviously way back at that parking issue, that woman who left the car down there and it was taken away and then sold, that was probably, I think, what I really wanted to see at that stage. Because and there's been two sides to this whole story, and I appreciate she was going to come back to me, but she hasn't yet, because I think there's now legal issues in there. But have you got any overview of the way it was treated, way it was done, and accepting that her car was taxed and insured, but obviously it shouldn't have been there as long as it was, right? I mean, let's face that. But have you got any points you want to put on this to
well, I can't comment on that case, but it might be helpful to make sure that you and others understand the legal frameworks.
Yeah.
So basically, under the local government legislation from the 80s, we've had powers in terms of abandoned vehicles and untaxed vehicles, and
it wasn't abandoned, it wasn't untaxed, was it?
Vehicles that have had fixed penalty notices have been unpaid, and that was those powers were changed a few years ago, and those changes are now in force. So I can only imagine what's happened, given your previous interview with her. It seemed like the coroner was involved. It seemed like fixed penalty notices were involved. So essentially, abandoned vehicles is one set of circumstances, but the police, local authorities, even if they wanted to, they went about it the right way, and the DOI can actually lift vehicles and put them in their compound,
which is what they did
in St Mark's, if fixed penalty notices, coroner's letters to the registered keeper's address haven't been
and I accept
paid.
That, and she should
and
overstay the welcome.
Police can do it as well. Police
totally.
can do it as
but
well if
should it
it's
have
a
been
dangerous vehicle.
sold? Should it have gone to the?
So let me help you understand that as well.
Okay.
So once vehicles get into the compound, there's another process of writing to the register keeper, I understand. And if the register keeper, doesn't do things, there's a choice. One choice is it stays in the compound forever, which is not practical, realistic. The other choice is that if the vehicle really isn't worth anything, it can just be scrapped. And then the third choice is that the vehicle can be sold at auction. And it seems to me from that lady's interview that's what happened in this case.
It was taxed and insured, and that was the only bit. Once that lady told me that, I was like going, "Whoa! Shouldn't you have waited until it ran out of tax, run out of insurance?
Well, that's if it's an
but
abandoned.
to sell it.
That's an abandoned vehicle. I mean, from what you said in that case, it sounded like the coroner had been involved. There were unpaid fixed penalty notices.
I'm trying to get Chris Thomas to answer a question as if you weren't a minister, maybe, because
I'm just trying to get.
You would be the people's champion on this, I'm sure, if you weren't involved in it.
No, as a backbencher, as a citizen, basically politicians have no right intervening in the law, and the law seems to be quite clear. I don't exactly know the details of this case, but there would be fixed penalty notice.
I'm failing to hear, and also that press release was so cold when it came out. It's like there was never once a bit of saying we may have to look at this again. We may have overstepped the speed of what we did. If a car's parked on a road in Douglas, and I know this from outside here, if it's taxed, the police can't remove it.
That's because we're talking about abandoned vehicles. It sounds like from your case you're talking about failure to pay fixed penalty notices, coroner's letters, then being at the compound and letters. It's what it sounded like from the lady's confession in this case. But I can't.
Do you have no sympathy then? Are you totally on the DOI sort of page on this, that they did the right thing in the right way, in the right manner?
Any politician has to respect the law, and the law. There are people who are suggesting that perhaps we should have tried to get in touch with insurance companies and followed up and so on. Basically, the law says you have to get in touch with the register keeper. I'm not even sure if you could go beyond that lawfully. This was going on for months and months and months from
and
his
she overstayed her welcome. And
essentially, when you go into,
I
I didn't actually go on a media round this morning, but I did talk on Manx Radio at 8 o'clock. That's why I'm not dressed in a suit and tie, and I'm not as handsomely prepared as you are and intelligently looking as you are, because I've been up for quite some time. But basically, essentially, I think a confusion might be that when you go into the airport car park, you have to pay on arrival. There are some other airports around the Isle of Man where you pay on departure. It could have been, I'm just surmising, it could have been that the idea that there was a £60 maximum charge is something that perhaps you could think you could pay at the end and everything's sorted. But the reality is, if you don't pay in advance in a car park that requires you lawfully to pay in advance, you have begun to commit an offence.
Okay, let's try this one. Do you think the signage is good enough down there? Because in the UK there is law, isn't it, to say you have a sign has to be readable from a certain distance that gives terms and conditions. On your app, terms and conditions might be helpful as well. And she didn't do it. Again, I keep saying, for some reason everyone's jumping on this that yes, her car was left there too late. And I think if we had her back in here, it'd be more useful for her to explain exactly what happened. I think she got stuck in the UK or something. But the fact is, she was in the wrong. But does that give, without having a big sign up to say you should do this or anything, don't you think you could have just left the car there? Or not, I mean, not you personally, but when the DOI's got so many other things to be doing, maybe.
I think there are hundreds and hundreds of fixed penalty notices at the airport since charging was reintroduced. I think there are actually genuinely hundreds of fixed penalty notices at the airport. There have been other fines. I would publish the amount of data, and the crucial thing is that there is an airport parking places order. That's what I've proposed changing. And we've got a statutory consultation period going on.
Let's move on to that.
So there is law, and yes, you're right. There will be law around exactly how that parking places order is controlled. But the law is this is my classic answer to people like Trevor Cowan in the old days of planning and so on. The law is valid, and a decision under law is valid until it's successfully challenged.
Although you had to dig deep to find that how long you could leave a car in there. I think someone from the AGs actually went back and found the actual the act. There's nothing there to say it. Anyway.
It's a maximum 2012 airport parking places order amended in 2013 and 15. And
you have no sympathy for this one, by sounds. I'm really shocked. I'm shocked.
I have lots of sympathy for every person. I'm a person's representative.
Yes.
But ultimately, it sounded like there were fixed penalty notices that were unpaid. There was coroner's letters that were
but it was
unanswered.
Still taxed and insured.
There was letters from the compound which were unanswered.
We're going round circles here, but don't you think it would be more suitable to wait until the tax and insurance had run out before you sell somebody else's property?
It is hard. It is hard. Every September, for instance, I get and every MHK gets letters from mums often, sometimes dads, to say, my daughter's just passed a driving test over the summer. She's gone and parked at Ballacameen. She's got a £60 parking ticket. Get me off. Get her off. She's like, look, we've got to have an enforcement system that's agreed by the public. There's a consensus that it's fair, and dangerous parking.
Okay, I'm not going anywhere. Taxed and insured. Mr. Thomas, taxed and insured is all I'm going to say on that one. But let's get onto this whole thing
and I want to summarise then. So there's one system for abandoned vehicles, there's another system for untaxed vehicles, there's another system for people that are in breach of fixed penalty notices and coroner's letters and so on.
And the reason we can't talk about this is because it went to auction, there was some property in the car which now seems to have gone or mislaid, and the potentially is something that may go in front of the courts. So let's leave that. You snuck in the Courier last week about charging or increasing the car parking charges. Hasn't played well. I have to say it sounds a bit odd.
Well, let's deal it in two ways. Yeah. The first one is, if we had had a public consultation, what would the question have been? Do you want free parking at the airport? What would the answer be? Yes. Next question, do you want cheaper car parking at the airport even than it is now? The answer would have been yes. You don't have public consultations on charges, fees, tax rates and that sort of thing, because the answer's a bit obvious. What happened with this one is this is made by the Highways Director. We're talking about fixed penalty notices. This is a parking places order, and that's covered by a schedule to a piece of legislation from 1985. It's been the same since 1985. We have to publish in a newspaper and wait for 14 and invite objections over at least 14 days, which is what's happened. And we've had objections over the weekend. I just chose to make it much more public, as did the political member. So
you could just put it up, could you? You could have just gone in there and just changed the prices.
We have to publish.
Publish that you're going to do it, but you don't have to take any.
We have to invite objections, and we have to take into account the objections, which is what was going on. So, but myself and the political member had two concerns, principally. The first one was to make sure the public knew about it. That's why we issued a press release to every media outlet.
Well, didn't you put it in the paper first? Then
No. We issued the press release on Tuesday saying, look out for it in the Courier. The funniest one was Jeff the Mongoose comment, whereby we actually paid for the advert in their sister newspaper, and they pretended they found it hard to find it. But anyhow,
so that's interesting, because
myself and Mr. Turton are friends. But anyhow, we released the press release before the Courier came out.
Right.
We released it on Wednesday, and before we released the press release, we told my political colleagues that we were about to release a press release. We didn't go into all the details, and it's open till the 21st. And as I already announced this morning, the order is not made. Things are likely to change. There's possibility to change.
Nobody can contact you about this by email. Everyone's got to write in. I mean, literally get a pen and paper out. Goodness knows, and find a stamp or something.
No, we've had lots of emails.
But, wasn't it? There was no electronic mail?
It's not on the consultation webpage because it's a statutory highways notice.
So people can send an email in.
People have been sending emails in. So what the law says is the order has to be available for inspection. I've got 20 or so over the weekend.
Do they send it to you? Do they send it to DOI? How do they do that?
It's, you have to get the order.
You guess it, have you?
No, there's an email that you can get the order from, and you can respond to that email.
Making this as difficult as possible. It shouldn't
it's not a referendum. It's not a referendum. We're inviting objections.
And you've already answered the question that no one wants to put the prices up.
So let's discuss reasonably then the situation we're in. So in April, so I said to you, the first one is we wanted to bring attention to this, which we've done. The second one was we have a debate on April the 25th in Tynwald, which is what the Broad Suite presentation was about, on the future of the airport, the function, the future and the form of the airport. We could have been accused, Mr. Glover and myself, we could have been accused of just moving towards a more arm's length one so somebody else could do difficult political things like put up parking charges. Mm-hmm. We wanted to take that on the chin ourselves. We wanted to say the airport has an income of 4 million or so, an expenditure of 12 million or so, a gap of 8 million or so.
Do you think the parking is going to alter that?
The report suggests that the amount we take from parking is much lower than it is, and we have an hour's free parking. What I said this morning is a lot of the suggestions I've received myself are 15 minutes is a bit much, Chris, but half an hour would probably be okay. So that might be one change we make. Right. Secondly, I've had quite a few disabled people who've said to me that that half an hour isn't enough for disability, and I've said that's fine because basically in dis zones you have twice the time if you have a disabled pass than you have if you don't have a disabled pass. Mm-hmm. So there's various issues that we're dealing with. Let
me tell you what's going to happen, in my view, because it's happened in the past. When at one stage the police outside were so vicious, they moved you on within seconds. So what happens is people go round to the hotel around the corner, and people wait. They won't go in that car park unless they absolutely have to, because people don't like paying.
And it's different in different families. It's different in different families.
And I've been there myself. That we literally, everyone is like waiting until either they get the phone call, they see the plane land, and then they go and they can pick them up. So the chances are, in only my view, humble view, is that you won't make any more money from parking because people will find a way around it. People won't pay.
Well, you'll remember it from last time. There was a whole period, 2012, 2013, 2014, 15, when David Cretney, Phil Gore and Lawrence Skelly were all involved in a similar issue. Yeah. I do believe it might be a Manx culture that we expect half an hour free parking at the airport. I do believe it might be that it's quite hard to charge for parking at the airport because of the nature, but we wanted that. We wanted that sorted out, and I'm expecting it to come up in the Tynwald debate on the 25th of April.
The maximum amount you're going to start charging for the airport in the you're changing the market, you have a long term or whatever. And that's
in the draft order.
You're going to make people get the bus or the taxis because it's probably a cheaper option for most people. Rather than paying that amount of money, they can just get in the taxi. And again, you'll make no money out of this. You'll be losing money because what you're getting now is okay, isn't it, for most people? Whatever you're getting in, I don't know what you're getting, but there's a good chance. It's not just you. I mean, any business knows that there's a price point, and if you get past that price point, people won't do it.
That's true.
And you'll lose money.
That's true.
And technically, you might actually take less money.
That's true. But if you're going to talk to me as a businessman, businessmen also make sure that they try to at least get their revenues to cover their costs, because you're always in a vulnerable position, especially when public finances are so tight. If you've got that huge subvention, because revenues are different, so it's different. So everything you say might well be right, and that's why it's a trial for a year. It might not even happen because this is a draft order that's been put out for objections, and there are already some places in Malurt. We talked to commissioners in advance as well. We didn't give them all the details, but we said to them we wanted to work with them during the trial if any new order comes in. At the moment, we get about £250,000, £300,000 parking revenue.
But you didn't have
in the
ages
old
when
days.
COVID was on, did you? I mean,
I'm not talking about now. I'm not talking about in the past.
You left it open even way after COVID.
We used to get 700,000, 800,000. There's a big difference.
There's a price people will pay.
Really welcome the debate, and of course there's a price which people will pay, and that's for a day's travel, for a long weekend's travel, 2 weeks travel, and maximum period.
If you weren't the minister, you'd be in here yelling blue.
Of course I wouldn't. I mean, to me, it's really.
I bet you would.
I wouldn't.
Because you were a man of the people. You were like, this is terrible.
To me,
no.
Okay. A mature politician understands that in times of financial crisis, you've got to find out where people can afford to pay more, and you've also got to. I'm in the process of making the case to Treasury that the public is clamouring for investment and extra expenditure at the airport. I don't think Treasury's quite heard that case in recent years. DOI had a big cutback in pretty much all of its areas of business, and I do think the airport is very important. We've got so much still to do at the airport, and let's talk about that in the next programme.
Yes, I know, because you might be here for a long time, but there's so much, seriously, and it's of interest to people, and we thank you for coming in to bat off my rudeness, and I'm not trying to be rude. I'm very passionate about it because it affects everyone, doesn't it? Let's face it. We all go to the airport and we don't want to pay if we can help it.
And I'm passionate, but just to close this part, it's very easy to spend money. It's harder to make the books balance.